What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Too Much Test Podcast, episode 35. As always, I am here with Sam Stolt. We have a special guest for you today. And just from talking before we even started, a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So I will let Sam introduce our guest and let's get the show started.
Yes. What's good, bro? I heard that you had some difficulties this morning with your YouTube.
Yeah, so today I was first day I was trying your pre-workout shoulder day. Got on the Smith machine, got one set going, getting warmed up. I went to go check my YouTube stats, and it was like, try re-signing in on this device, and I'm like, that's odd. And then tried that a couple times, and then I looked at I just searched my email I searched YouTube for test your levels, and I started seeing nothing, and I was like, yeah, this is bad. And I got an email that my shit was deleted for posting links for pharmaceutical medications.
Damn.
Filed an appeal, and within like 28 minutes, they carefully reviewed it. You know, the guy in India that they pay to click deny, approve, carefully reproved it, and he denied it.
Damn.
That's 4 years of making videos down the drain.
Hundreds of videos. Yeah. So it's
400.
400 videos. Damn. Well, hopefully you can get it back. If anybody knows of any way or contact, feel free to reach out on Instagram. There's some links down below, but without further ado, we have an expert in stem cells who's been doing this for years. We are going to pick his brain about all sorts of stuff. So let's bring on Josh. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, doing well. Doing well.
Thank you for taking the time to come on today. I know we had chatted beforehand, but I'll go to, say, NCBI or PubMed, and when I'm thinking about like topics to look up or research, I will search a term, and then I will just peruse through the different research papers that come up. And there's only been two terms that I see a exponential growth curve. So if you're not aware, you're listening to this, if you search for something in NCBI, you get to see per year the number of research papers that come out. I've seen a parabolic growth in crypto. When you look for crypto research papers, same exact thing. But when you look at stem cells, oh my goodness. Yeah, and there's like 20,000 per year that are coming out, and it's still increasing with every additional year. So I'd love to hear how you got into stem cells and just your background and like your interest to go in this direction.
For sure. So I've had the clinic. I founded it about 9.5 years ago. First started out with more hormone replacement therapies, mainly human growth hormone. We have a legal fly-in-by program. Come down to Puerto Vallarta, you can load up, go home legally with growth hormone test, different things like that. And then it was about 6.5 years ago, I'd known about stem cells, and I guess I'll get into that backstory, but that's when we started that. I take it all back. My dad had Lou Gehrig's disease. That was 17, 18 years ago when he was diagnosed, and about 15 years ago passed from it. And I got pretty disenfranchised with the whole U.S. medical system. I'm from Seattle, up there. It's not quite like that now because some of the new laws, but back then, things like growth hormone or testosterone, they fell under the Anabolic Steroid Act. So if you wanted a prescription for those and it was off-label use, pretty much if you weren't a little kid that wasn't growing tall enough, if you didn't have a pituitary gland function, or you didn't have HIV wasting, you were not getting growth hormone. And it's for muscle wasting. So you think ALS, hey, I'm losing, muscle. If it was me, I'd be doing bodybuilder doses of all that stuff. And I didn't know about the whole, underground market, all that kind of stuff back then, unfortunately. And yeah, I learned a lot about it. And then I got into caregiving. I actually moved to Mexico back in 2008, looking to open up an assisted living community, and had read an article one day. It's like, man outsources parents to India. It was like, made me laugh. I'm like, okay, smart, just too far away. My parents always had a place in Mazatlan we went to every year. And I was like, hey, not a lot of regulation, great doctors. And it's really the over-regulation and things that, for medicine, for assisted living, these things are just, it drives the cost up like crazy. So I'm always kind of looking for those different angles and things to kind of take, that you can get through and do these things. And so I got into that, met a doctor, had been doing this program like we do now, where you can fly down legally, get the stuff and fly home. He went back for a PhD program. Me and my wife's Mexican, kind of built a website, got things going, and people started coming down, and we just, we've just been doing that ever since.
Wow. And then how did you, that's fascinating, by the way. How did you transition to the stem cell portion of things, right? Because the PED, well, I call it PEDs, right? Like a lot of times we might be talking about them in this contest with TYL.
Yeah, they are. They're great.
So how did you transition into stem cells? And then also what are stem cells? Like, because there's going to be a lot of people who don't know what they are.
So transition, because I started out thinking we were just going to have all these meatheads coming down, all that. Did not happen. Those guys, they just buy online and stuff. And like for growth hormone, you really don't want to do that, unfortunately, when you start digging into it. You'd be much better off doing like what you guys are doing with the peptides. I mean, way better option if you're in the US. So yeah, we ended up getting mostly people over 40 that just wanted to look and feel better. So we already had that health basis. I had heard about stem cells when my dad was sick. We had a friend who also had ALS that went over to China back then. They were doing embryonic stem cells over there then. We do not do embryonic stem cells. They don't work. Remember when Bush was in office and there was all that big, news about, oh, he banned stem cells, this and that. Well, he didn't ban it. All he said was his advisors told him we should not federally fund research into embryonic stem cells because they didn't think it would work. And it turned out to be true. The state of California spent $2 billion researching embryonic stem cells, came up with nothing. But mesenchymal stem cells like we use, those do work. So that kind of led me down that rabbit hole. I had heard rumors, things about stem cells going on in Mexico, 7-8 years ago. My wife and I finally tracked it down, found out what was really going on, who was doing it right. We invested in a lab and got going from there. And yeah, people started coming down and it just word of mouth took off from there. It was good timing too. It was when that interview with like Joe Rogan and Dr. Riordan in Panama came out. I mean, it was a great timing and everything. They'd been doing mesenchymal stem cells in Mexico for 16 years. It's just nobody had actually kind of tracked it down and figured out what was going. And that's what we've done, is keep the quality control there and help a lot of people.
What's the difference between the embryonic and the it's MESO something, right?
Yeah. So some people call them mesenchymal. The guy who named them always says mesenchymal, so I just say mesenchymal. The difference is this: there's a few different types. So embryonic stem cells are from like aborted fetuses, aborted babies, all that. That's where the big ethical question comes in too. Mesenchymal stem cells, you can take them. They basically live on any tissue that has capillaries. So think of my arm as like a capillary tube. The mesenchymal stem cell looks like a little octopus wrapped around there. And when you're injured, say my elbow hurt, they come off, they go there, and they just guide the repair process. So this guy, Dr. Arnold Kaplan, in the early 90s, discovered in the lab that he could take them in the lab, and he jokingly said he could make them dance. He could turn them into fat, cartilage, muscle, tendons, all these different tissues. But when he inject them into animals and then people, they don't differentiate. They don't become anything. So technically, he wishes he could rename them medicinal signaling cells, because that's really what they are. They're like the manager on the construction site in your body. They go to the inflammation. They then take that inflammation and they tell everything how to get rid of it. It's how your body's meant to heal. It's just we lose 90% of them when we hit bone maturity, which for men is 21 and women it's 18, because we lose 90% of our capillaries because we're not growing taller. We don't need all that extra blood flow. And it's a big part of aging. It's a big part of why we don't heal the way we did in the past.
So the please correct me, can you say the name one more time?
Just say mesenchymal. That's how
mesenchymal.
Yeah, or mesenchymal, however you want. What's
mesenchymal
easier? Yeah.
The meso stem cells, you said they're actually not the stem cells that are doing the work, if I was understanding that correctly.
Yeah. They're like the manager telling everything what to do.
So how does that work then? If if these are working to help with also, and then I'd like to hear as well, like what there's probably a long laundry list of shit that they're helping with, but how do they do that if they're not actually doing things?
So what they do, they work via what's called the paracrine effect. So it's the different signals that they release. So for example, they interact with your immune system. We have unreal success with autoimmune diseases like type 2 diabetes, MS, ulcerative colitis. I mean, I have a bunch of patients in full remission from MS. It's crazy to see. So with what they do is, yeah, they send out these things called cytokines, which are signaling proteins, and they interact with the T cells, the B cells, the killer cells. And think of it like updating the software. In say like type 2 diabetes, your immune system is attacking the pancreas, right? And that's causing all these insulin sensitivity issues. Blood sugar goes up, A1C goes up. So instead of just trying to take some metformin or insulin to take care of the insulin, which is just, you're going after the effects of the disease, not the root cause. The MSCs go to the pancreas, or they don't even have to go to the pancreas. They interact with the immune system through the bloodstream when you do an IV, and they essentially update the software, get them to start protecting the pancreas instead of attacking it. So that's one thing they do. Then the next thing they do is they have these things called chemokines, which are chemical signals. It does sort of the same thing with the immune system, and they target inflammation, and they're attracted to it. So when they get to the inflammation, they have these things called exosomes they release. There's like 1,000 different types. So they're like, think of like the aircraft carrier with the individual jets, right? And imagine if each jet just had a single payload. Maybe it has one cytokine, one chemokine, one trophic factor. So they mark the area that needs to be attacked, and then they go interact with the immune system, with repair cells like growth factors and things, and they send them in there to start doing the work to heal your body.
So that's interesting, because my basic knowledge of stem cells was that a stem cell was kind of like a moldable thing. It was like a piece of Play-Doh, to where
yes,
you got a stem cell, it could go and it could like attach to a bone and start becoming bone. And my rudimentary thought process on how it worked was that if you took stem cells and you injected them near an injury, they would go to where they needed to go and kind of repair and become, what was injured. But it sounds like it's like you said, more of like a manager. So you got a bunch of workers. There's no one in charge. They're all doing. What was that?
They shouldn't be called stem cells. He wishes he could rename them medicinal signaling cells, but the name stuck. And now it's so confusing because there's like 4 or 5 different types of stem cells, and people don't know the differentiation because they're not biologists. It's not something most people are studying. So it's confusing enough already. And then you got all these different types like hematopoietic stem cells. Those are in your bone marrow. They create red and white blood cells. So if you have leukemia, you want hematopoietic stem cells. But you hear all these clinics in the US using bone marrow for stem cell therapies, and they chip your hip, they take out some bone marrow, they spin it up in a centrifuge, and they take that liquid and inject it, say, to your knee or somewhere. Well, that's like the worst source there is for mesenchymal stem cells. Tons of hematopoietic stem cells, but you don't want those, because white blood cells, and this is a problem as we heal and as we age, is like I said, we lose 90% of our capillaries, 90% of our white blood cells. Well, now, not white blood cells, are mesenchymal stem cells. When we get injured, say like my knee, for example, that was the first thing I fixed, multiple meniscus tears, partially torn ACL, and it was scar tissue. I had already been on human growth hormone for over 4 years. It kept it from getting worse, but when your body gets injured after 21 as a man, white blood cells rush there, and they can only heal via fibrosis, which is scar tissue. So once the scar tissue gets in, it's like if you punched a hole in this wall, it's just drywall, no big deal. The white blood cells throw a little putty. They don't care if it's pretty. They're like, not structural, good to go. Well, you get some mesenchymal stem cells in there, they're going to like, all right, let's chip this out. Let's fill it with putty. Let's sand it down. Let's paint it. That's what they do. They come in and repair your body, and nothing else really can get rid of that scar tissue, which is why most of us don't heal from these like nagging injuries and different things.
Wow. So this is so like what TYL is saying. Like I had a very, it sounds very inaccurate picture of what stem cells do, right? That is this, Play-Doh, so to speak, but that can do whatever the fuck you want it to do, so to speak. But this is obviously the outside view inside. But trying to understand this, can you talk about some of these different types of stem cells?
Yeah. So I mean, those are the main ones that you'll hear about, or they're most common. The embryonic stem cells, they've pretty much been ruled out. Like they're not going to work, right? Then you have your mesenchymal stem cells like we use. Then you have the hematopoietic. All three slightly different. The thing that they're working on, and why I think the FDA will never allow mesenchymal stem cells, is because they're naturally occurring, right? So if you wanted, like I have actually a guy who just moved here to Puerto Vallarta. He is one of the top, like, he's not like a regulator, but he's like, when Pfizer wants to buy a lab in a foreign country, they send him to make sure this lab is up to spec and it's worth buying. Well, his friend has a lab in Boise, Idaho. They just shut down because he had them over GMP standards. But when they went and said, hey, we're going to develop umbilical cord stem cells, we won't replicate them, which is what's illegal in the US. We'll just use the whole umbilical cord. Like there's one company in Utah that does this. They have to take a whole umbilical cord and placenta to get like 10 million cells. Well, this lab in Boise wanted to do the same thing. And they came in and they said, oh, well, that's a new medicine. Well, a new medicine application is $2.5 million. Then you have to go through all 4 phase trials of the FDA. You spend hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you can't own that at the end, like you don't have the patent, why would you spend that money? Everybody else, it's just going to be a race to the bottom of who can sell it the cheapest. Nobody's going to make any money. So there's zero incentive. So the future of this in the US won't be like what we're doing. It's being held back for those reasons. It's going to be what are called induced pluripotent stem cells. So there's this doctor from Japan in 2012 that won the Nobel Peace Prize for developing, he could take your skin cells, he could use like CRISPR and different gene editing techniques and essentially make them like an embryonic stem cell. They just did one of the first heart treatments with this, where they created a bunch of myocardial tissue for a heart. And instead of giving the guy a new heart, they just put in these, new cultured up myocardial cells. And since they're from his own skin, they have the same, what are called HLA factors, human leukocyte antigen. So cool, that'll be the future. But like mesenchymal stem cells, like I have a ton of like up on my site of people's ejection fraction that are in congestive heart failure before and after our treatments that are out of congestive heart failure because the stem cells went in and they guided the repair. So you didn't need the HLA markers. Mesenchymal stem cells lack what's called HLA, human leukocyte antigen. It'd be like if you had a kidney and you were, I needed a kidney, we were a perfect match. Our HLA markers are going to be different. My body's going to want to reject it. So since mesenchymal stem cells lack that, we can take them, like we could do a biopsy of your muscle, isolate the stem cells, inject those mesenchymal stem cells into me, no rejection, no problem. So
you don't have like the issue where I get a transplant from TYL, but for whatever fucking reason, my body's like, nope. And I have all these reactions.
You don't want my liver, brother. You don't want that.
It's called graft versus host disease. And in fact, they use mesenchymal stem cells to treat that, to lower how much they've done like kidney transplants where they put MSCs in at the same time. And those patients need like half of the anti-rejection meds that a normal person would need with the same transplant. It just, again, reprograms the immune system. It's so we take our stem cells from healthy live births, girls that are between the ages of 18 and 25. They have a whole questionnaire, like how many sexual partners. If they answer more than one, instant disqualified. The women are given all the blood tests, everything, because they couldn't carry a virus. but they have a less than 5% chance of carrying a retrovirus. So we got to make sure we're good there.
What's a retro?
It'd be like HIV, like hepatitis C. Those are retroviruses. So even then, less than a 5% chance of carrying it. But either way, we want to be as, safe as possible. So we give a third-party analysis, blood work from the patient and from the cells once they've been isolated, showing, they're free of all that, and you can take them from these donor sites. And we use umbilical and placental tissue because the older you are, the slower your cells duplicate. So it's exponential. It's 2, 4, 16. Like it increases extremely, extremely fast. So we don't need a lot of tissue, but the younger the tissue is, the faster it replicates.
So where does this? You said females, right? But then,
well, because there has to be a birth. We take the umbilical cord and the placenta, which would be thrown away otherwise. It's just the youngest tissue you can get.
Oh, okay. So
no babies are harmed. It's just take the umbilical cord.
So instead of like women going home and like eating it, like you guys actually turned it into like medicine that actually helps people.
And we actually have it lyophilized. Like some people will reconstitute it and inject it. Like, it leaves quite the lump, but it slowly releases all those nutrients back into your system. We're not really doing that much anymore, but I've done it. Yeah.
What was lyophilized is I've seen that.
Yeah.
Okay. And they'll inject that. Is that so? When you're giving these treatments, how are these MSC cells is it like in a drip, or how do you do? Are you doing it like in the ejection? Like say it's in the shoulder, the injury. How do you?
We do it everywhere. So if you have an autoimmune condition or like a heart issue or an organ issue, IV is what you want. Though we did start doing direct kidney injections. We go into the operating room and we have an internist that'll, put the cells right in, which, for some of these guys that maybe have run some gear too long, not a bad idea. Too much Anavar.
So what, now I have to know, like, what are some of the cool things that you've seen and what stories, like, because I mean, I think we probably all agree here that like most medicine is not like it's like trying to treat the thing over there, but the real issue is right fucking here. And they're like in 2 rooms, 6, like at the front, 2 houses over, 2 rooms over, right? They're not even like in the fucking realm of reality of things that are important. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on different things that these things can treat.
Yeah, I mean,
just real quick, I think the person, if you're watching this behind Sam's sheet, probably needs a lot of stem cells. Sam looks like he's in like a kill room right now. He looks like Dexter. He's got some spooky light on the side, and he's got a sheet going on.
He's extracting stem cells from someone back there.
I think Sam may be harvesting some stem cells or something.
I gotta paint this wall. But go ahead.
They treat so many things, and that's where I think it kind of puts some people off because it sounds too good to be true. We do the most treatments we do are knees. It's just the most common injury, and when you do their numbers, knees are number 1, hearts are number 2. We do tons of shoulders and hips.
So like I've had an issue with my knee for I don't know 6-7 years. Like this year with using peptides for HGH and some BPC for a prolonged period of time, this is like the best year it's felt in a long time. But still, every once in a while, there's a little bit of like discomfort or pain, depending on what I'm doing or how I'm moving, kind of thing. But overall, like this year relative to the previous 6 years or so, it's been the best so far. So like that, I'm sure there's 1,000 different types of injuries with knee. Can it fix like all of them, or like
the majority?
I mean, it probably could.
as long as something's not completely torn. Like if your ACL is completely torn, they're not magic. They're not going to like, put it back together. But like my ACL was, I think it was pretty bad. I've got the MRIs before and after, like the before and then 9 months after I did my knee. That was like 6 years ago. I had like multiple meniscus tears, partially torn ACL, and 9 months later, it looked like a new knee. Like, and it's up there on the website. Now, the tough part is we do the most knees, but like it's mostly anecdotal evidence because nobody wants to do an MRI again after they feel good. I mean, and I can't blame them. Those things suck. Like, so we've had patients as far as 4th degree osteoarthritis, and that's the toughest. Like cartilage is the slowest, meniscus, ligaments, tendons, really easy. Labrums and shoulders or hips, really easy. But cartilage is tougher. So we'll see like 4th degree osteoarthritis get to like, 2nd, borderline 3rd degree from one treatment. Those are the patients that might have to come back for like a second. But we really go out of our way to try and make it like a one and done kind of experience. Like I did my knees 6.5 years ago, and I just redid my right knee because I just did another MRI, and I had a little bit of inflammation like behind my kneecap now, but my meniscus, ACL, all that's still perfect. I just, I started riding my bicycle a lot and lots of squats. So you're going to wear it down again. That's, it's just if you exercise a lot.
So real quick, just some things you touched on. So, I mean, I assume this was like multiple treatments, but you're saying,
Yes.
I mean, for the most part, unless you have like severe cartilage issue, this is a one and done thing. I fly down. Now, what's the procedure? I mean, you throw an alcohol swab in my knee, hit me up a couple times with a syringe, and then you send me on my way, and I got some HGH on the way and some DECA on the way home.
Yeah, why not? It's so anticlimactic. We get these people coming in with like severe pain, and it's just a quick injection. It takes like it's like injecting testosterone. It's that quick. It could not be quicker. We've got some really awesome doctors that do all this for us. Some of the procedures might take more time, but that's it just depends what you have. So I guess you asked about some of the different ones. One of the ones we're doing the most of now is called intrathecal, and that is where you go, it's almost like a spinal tap, but you're using a 30 gauge needle. Our anesthesiologist does it, and it gets into the spinal fluid, and that gets the cells up and down the spinal cord, which any nerve damage, and then to the brain. So we're doing that. Helps. The results with like MS patients have been way better. We're seeing like Alzheimer's, like it's completely like stopping progress for a lot of people, even helping people form new memories. We're seeing it with there's tons of, the most studies on that are with stroke patients. They've proven in multiple studies that the sooner you can get stem cells to your brain after a stroke, the higher the chance that you're going to have no side effects, like, no droopy face, no, like the nerve repair. These things repair nerves like you couldn't believe. Like the nerve damage, like here's the best example I've ever seen. You want a crazy one? This guy from Long Beach, he's like 70 something, like comes in looking like a homeless guy. And I'm like, oh, how can we help you? And he's like, feel my hands. And we were like walking down to the Starbucks to get a coffee, and his hands are ice cold. And it's like 100 degrees out. I mean, it's weird, right? It turns out there's this homeopathic remedy some people do where they put like a drop of hydrogen peroxide in water. Well, this dude somehow poured a glass full of hydrogen peroxide in a glass full of water, drank the whole glass of hydrogen peroxide, kept it down, just fried his central nervous system, like neuropathy head to toe. And, we did an IV, and we've got the guy like 95% better. His feet were a little bit bad, and then we had to do those like 6 months later. But yeah, the nerve pain relief is like unreal. Like I had sciatica 3 years ago. It's mild herniation, L4, L5. We just injected some intramuscularly, and it was gone in like 2 weeks.
So could this, I mean, could this be something where it could be like we're on a Zoom call and I do blood work here and you get the results over email or log in through a portal, and then you just ship me shit that's like dry ice and I just do an injection? Right? Like how does that
you got to fly down here. It's just not worth it. Like it's such an easy flight, so easy to get here. It's just better just to do that. I mean, it should be everywhere. This is what's so stupid. Like so many people are in pain. And I mean, I'm from Seattle. I follow this like Instagram page, like Seattle's gone to shit. And like, it looks like the zombie apocalypse there. All these people fentanyled out and stuff. And it's like, just the pain pills it's ridiculous. And again, it's treating symptoms, not the root cause.
So here's a question. So, I mean, obviously, and this is from what you're saying, this is in a similar spot to BPC. It's been proven to help.
Exactly.
There's thousands upon thousands of people that have said this has helped. This is fantastic. But it's naturally made in your body, so it's not patentable. So who's going to put the money up? You know, why am I going to spend $50 million getting FDA approval to where, you know, Johnson & Johnson is going to be selling a bottle of it at Walmart? That doesn't make sense. At the same time, I mean, it's so weird that you think, like, when I was younger, I thought, oh, Mexico's a shithole, you know, like growing up, like, oh, it's drug dealers, Tijuana, it's a bunch of hookers and, you know,
so far ahead.
And stuff. And then you start to look at places like Thailand, Mexico, a lot of other places, and they have better medicine than the United States, who has these massive pharmaceutical companies, you know, and I've heard lots of people that go to Mexico. What was it? Brian said on our thing, there's vitamin B13 that's supposedly supposed to be really anti-cancer, which is banned in the United States. So people go down to Mexico to get it. I mean, I don't know. It's crazy. It seems like all the good medicine and all the new stuff is in other countries where the pharmaceutical companies don't live.
And it's so not dangerous here. I've lived here for 14 years. Like, I mean, this Puerto Vallarta is special because there's like no port to fight over or anything. Like, the border's the shithole, right? But both sides. I mean, it's just, don't go to Juarez or El Paso. Everybody knows that. No, but you know what? I was in Tijuana earlier this year, and I was like, there was like one or two little like favela looking shanties, but I was like, this is like a cleaner, nicer version of San Diego. Like, the roads were all brand new and paved. Like, I drove to, it blew my mind. I'd never been to Tijuana before, and it was truly cleaner and nicer in San Diego. It was crazy. Like, in Puerto Vallarta, I jokingly call it cheap Hawaii. Like, if you saw our office, like we've got like 6 offices here, but the other one where we do treatments, it's like on the canal. It looks like Fort Lauderdale, like all the yachts in the canal and like mansions on the canal. And, you know, our office looks over that. The Hard Rock Hotel's across the street on the beach. Like, it's paradise. It's hilarious that like people have this idea that it's scary. And like, I'm like, yes, any major city in the US is scary right now.
Well, if you told people like, yo, I'm going to Mexico to have surgery, they'd be like, bro, you're crazy. Like, what are they, a bunch of hacks over there? You know, but they don't realize, I don't think a lot of Americans realize that you don't walk down to Mexico and it's just dirt roads and they're selling like homemade tacos and stuff on the side of the road and you got chickens everywhere. Like, you don't realize like Mexico and almost every other country have like beautiful, nice cities with restaurants, hospitals, medicine. It's just crazy. But here's a quick question. I mean, what's the rough cost of this? I mean, minus the flight, I mean, like a knee, what does roughly a knee cost?
Yeah, a knee is $3,000. That includes the MRI, a full blood panel. We even look at like, you know, like hepatic profile, lipid profile, testosterone, thyroid. Like, we don't have to do that, but most people haven't even looked at these markers in the US because it's so tough to get. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people have like wanted to lose weight. And like, I always check their thyroid and it's like 70% of the time they have hypothyroidism. I'm like, you can take all the growth hormone in the world. You're not going to get skinny if we don't get your thyroid in order. Like, it's crazy to me. So yeah, that includes everything. I mean, you can spend $2,000 on an MRI in most cities in the US alone. So I try to keep it as cheap as possible to help as many people as possible. That's really,
you guys have like a buy one, get one 50% type of thing.
No, and I have all the prices on the site. Like, I hate it
go ahead and what's the name of the site?
It's www.dreambody.clinic.
Dreambody.clinic. So
yeah, and I named it that. We're in the process right now. I bought a building. We're going to have the largest stem cell clinic in the world in about 2 months. That we're kind of getting going and stuff there. So that will open probably September, hopefully, and we'll have the lab there. But yeah, we just keep growing, and we'll change the name to DBC Medical Center then. Because we do a lot of autistic kids. This really helps them. And the name doesn't fit for that. Like, you know, it worked well with like performance. People want to feel better. And, you know, we've had some really like high level performance and athlete type people. But like, we had a guy today that has like 3 Super Bowl rings, you know, like, I mean, it's crazy. So,
what What's the difference between, and I wanted to ask you like more of a personal question about my brother who just broke his neck, but what's the difference between you have like the step down is in my mind PRP versus stem cells. Can you talk about the
Totally.
differences between those two? Because I mean, PRP is something it's not extremely common, but a lot more like slightly progressive, or just people who doctors like to think like, or just like to help patients more so than just giving them drugs.
I love PRP.
Sam, just keep in mind that PRP is not something that normal doctors even know exists. I mean, that's specialty clinics. That's places that do stuff like this.
Insane. Like I
forget we're on the fringe already. Like, and when you're on the fringe already, you kind of like don't realize you're on the fringe already. And so, good point.
No, it's insane. Like I have 3 centrifuges for PRP. We don't use it for knees because they swell if you put too much fluid, but every other joint we add PRP because PRP is loaded with 6 different cytokines and 6 different growth factors. And the main ones being IGF-1, IGF-2, which is what, growth hormone converts to IGF-1 in the liver, which is why you want it, just helps repair tissue. And then VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, creates new micro blood vessels, which when something's repairing, you want that. So truly, like PRP, every doctor in the world should have a centrifuge. It is so stupid simple. You take blood, you put it, you spin it. We add a drop of calcium gluconate, which they can't do in the US. Studies show just with that, you're making the PRP something like 100 times more effective because it's a drop. It's so stupid. Like I've got the studies on the site and stuff, but PRP, here's why PRP doesn't always work is, again, it goes back to how your body heals with that scar tissue. So like a good example, I had a patient, he had done treatment with us, brought a friend, and he came and he had his cast on. His thumb was all wrapped up. And I'm like, oh, dude, what happened? And he goes, oh, I tripped and fell, dislocated it. He shows me the x-ray. His thumb was like down here. It was gnarly. I mean, right? And I'm like, okay, well, you won't need stem cells. How long? Or you did that yesterday? And he's like, yeah, it was yesterday. I go, you don't need stem cells. We spun up his blood. We did PRP. And the thing is, if you can get those growth factors like IGF-1 in there right away, like it will heal without the scar tissue. Like we've done this for patients with growth hormone that have been in car wrecks. Like we had this one guy who like nearly lost his shoulder in a car wreck in Costa Rica. We put him on 4 IU a day. 4.5 months later, he came back and he's like feeling good. I mean, they told him he'd never have full use of his arm again, but it's because the scar tissue didn't form. So yeah, PRP should be the go-to for an immediate injury. It's just if you do it months after, too much scar tissue's formed and it won't heal. It's like my knee. I had the meniscus tear, the ACL tear. I probably did it in high school. Who knows? I mean, they'd always hurt, right? But the growth hormone really kept it from getting worse, all that IGF-1, but it couldn't get past the scar tissue. It's the exact same thing with PRP.
So somebody's like, okay, cool. I got knees or hip or whatever. Is it like, okay, you just do it once, but in conjunction with maybe you're utilizing, so it's the MSC cells, PRP at the same time, and then, take these peptides for, the next 6 to 12 months or something like that to help this like last, like how long does this MSC stuff the cells last?
The cells can stay in your system for 8 months to a year. So like for example, if you lived here and like patients that live here, like if we do their knee or their shoulder, we'll do it 3 months free PRP follow-up. Because I mean, it doesn't cost anything. You're just spinning blood. I mean, it's stupid. They'll charge you $500 in the States. So like really the best thing to do is if your knee was injured, do the stem cells. And then they should get a hold of you guys and get those, get that BPC, get some TB 500, get it in there. And you're just giving more things for the stem cells to guide for the healing process. It can do nothing but benefit. They just work together.
What's really interesting and really scary is that, and I've said this, I believe I've said this on this podcast a few times, the future of medicine is going to be peptides and figuring out how the body can help heal itself. You know, PRP
Totally.
is one aspect to it, and I'm just reading about your shoulder for personal reasons, and you know, it looks like you mixed the PRP as well with that. The
Yes.
scary thing is that, you know, in the United States, because it's not patentable, it's like they're going to have these new technologies, and you know, this is going to progress. The stem cells is not like the end all be all. This is going to
Yeah.
progress as the years go by, and the US is going to be stuck taking painkillers while people in Mexico are running freaking miles and feeling fantastic, and the rest of the world's going to start looking at the United States and be like, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Like,
Yep.
that's crazy.
What do you think about like something? So from a longevity, right? Because I've been in like more on the fitness side of the realm from a performance thing for a number of years, and probably close to 10 years at this point, but in the fitness for like multiple decades.
Yeah.
And I see a big growth in longevity. And then we're talking about these MSC cells, and I'm like, wow, doing something like this on an annual basis, or either like a every 2 year, every 3 year, like that just seems like a awesome strategy just for longevity. Is there anything that you've seen in the research linking the stem cells to longevity, or is it more so longevity increases because of all this shit that is being taken care of in your system?
I think it's both. That's what's so cool is you're going to hit it from two different ways. So there's that guy, Dr. Neil Riordan in Panama, right? Like he wrote the book on this. If you ever want to really do a deep dive,
I would love a book
you
recommendation.
read the book. It's called Stem Cell Therapies, A Rising Tide. In this book, what he's going to talk about, and the first thing that's so important for the anti-aging is that these guys, they discovered that the mesenchymal stem cells, they do like a triage when they go through your body in an IV. So they go to your heart first, and cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. Everyone's afraid of COVID or terrorists. No, you should be afraid of your own heart. It's gonna want to kill you someday, right? So
that's the book right there.
Yeah, that's the book right there.
I just want to make sure I got the right one. Please continue.
You're good. That you'll love that book, and I'll send you some videos of his mentor, Dr. Arnold Kaplan. That really, his YouTube videos are the best. And I've met him in person. He's consulted with our lab and stuff. Dr. Kaplan. It's cool. It's unreal stuff, right? So the coolest thing is when they do this, like they're going through your system. About 70 or 80% get stuck in the lungs. You're like, crap, they get wasted. No, they don't get wasted because they stick around for like 8 months to a year, and they kind of stay in the capillaries and they interact with cells passing by. And what they found is that they do this triage. They're like, you're going to die no matter what, leaving you alone. You're healthy, you're good, but you could use a little juice. They have these nanotubes that attach to the weak cell, and they donate their mitochondria. So if you can increase mitochondria for a cell, it's just going to live longer. That's the battery pack, the engine of the cell. I mean, mitochondrial health is one of the most important factors for aging. And then the second thing they go into in that book is, are you familiar with like telomere length?
Very vaguely.
I'll make it really, really simple. So your telomere length is every cell has what looks like this tail that looks like a DNA double helix, right? So you got the rungs to the ladder. Every time a cell replicates, you lose a rung to the ladder. So a cell can theoretically only do about 50 to 60 replications. It's called the Hayflick limit. So technically, if you do the math, you can only live on paper to like 125 before you're out of telomere length. And then the cell goes senescent. When a cell goes senescent, it doesn't just die. Now it's like an evil bad cell that goes around killing other cells and sending out like bad growth factors and things. So it's even worse than if the cell just went into apoptosis and just died. So that's as far as you can live. So they've proven that the mesenchymal stem cells extend telomere length for at least 6 types of cells. They believe it does it for more, but like it's really tough because you're talking trillions of cells trying to measure telomeres of every one. So like even the tests aren't that accurate, but like so far they have found that it extends it for at least 6 types of cells, probably for more. And if you can extend telomere length, well, theoretically you could live longer. So I think it's probably the best thing you could do. Like for me, growth hormone was the biggest thing. I've got patients in their 70s and 80s that have been on growth for decades that like look like they're 50 and they move like 20-year-olds. But like, I think we're going to find, maybe you look at me in like 20 or 30 years, I'll be like, hopefully I just stop aging. But I don't know. And if anything, it's all about quality of life. And if they're repairing all these other things, they're going to prevent heart attacks, because the inside lining of your blood vessels should be it's like a wall has texture, right? It should have texture. Well, when that texture gets worn down from things like sugar, and this is why I really think sugar is the worst thing you can eat, because it's like sandpaper in there, right? It's smoothing it down. And when it gets smooth, that's when LDL can stick to it. Your bad cholesterol. It's not. They're finding
it's like etching the surface of cement. If you like, that just basically burns the surface so that you can put something.
Now it can stick, and you don't want it to stick. So the stem cells actually help regenerate the inner lining and the outer lining of blood vessels. So you keep that texture and you're not going to have clogs, because they're finding actually men whose artery walls are not smooth and are like that are healthy. If if you have high LDL, they're finding those people live longer. Bad cholesterol, the studies are proving, isn't so bad. I mean, most of your major hormones are derivatives of cholesterol, like testosterone. It starts as cholesterol. Like, you need these things. It's just we're screwing up our bodies with all this processed food and sugar. That's really the problem.
Well, look at the American food pyramid. The biggest base is carbohydrates, and then what's the next one? Proteins, and then fats. You take a little bit. So I mean, it's completely pretty much the opposite.
It's backwards.
2 quick questions. Can I get a discount if I bring a young female with me? Because I feel like I can find one. Free trip to Mexico.
You're gonna bring sand to the beach, man? Like, what are you
I mean, no, it'd be consensual, forms and all that good stuff. But so another quick question. So side effect wise, and now I'm not expecting much, but I did just want to ask. I mean, I'm assuming that it's because it's a natural human thing, but I mean, are there side effects or any adverse reactions?
Yeah, with knees, we've seen a few knees. I think it's been like, probably like 8 people have had some swelling after treatment. And it turned out to be from either too many stem cells, or then the original ones was from too much fluid. That's why we stopped using the PRP. We were using like 2 milliliters of stem cells, 4 milliliters of PRP. That was too much, right? Just too much fluid. Once we got rid of that and just went to just stem cells, it didn't happen again. But you really don't want to go over 50 million. So, and it's not like you can just count out 50 million. So I do
raise the price if you had to do that.
Yeah. So
is 2 ml about 50 million?
It depends on the culture, but yeah, we're able to. We do this. We're gonna 1 square centimeter of the first round of cells is like, say, 10 million cells. I can't remember the exact number. Well, you're going to duplicate it. So it's going to be like, first we got 1 million, then we got, 2 million, then we got, so it's exponentially grows. So we know, like, each day we cultivate the day before, and we can do pretty rough estimates of like what we'll get. So like, we had a patient last week, his knee swole actually. And it turned out when I did I've got what's called a cell counter. It's like an inverted microscope. Like, he probably got closer to like 90 million cells. So we've just had to adjust the lab so that doesn't happen. But that's the extent. Like, I mean, I've had these in my spinal fluid go to my brain. I mean, it's started dreaming again, started like better memory, different things. So it's super safe as far as side effects. Like the risk to reward, like there's virtually no downside. That's the crazy part. And then the success rate is, I'd say at least 80% of people get the results they want. The other like 19% get some gains. And it's like maybe less than 1% of people are like, oh, that did nothing. And that's just when you compare it to any other medicine. I mean, you give 10 people an Advil for a headache, you're going to get like 3 people are going to get relief from that headache. That's like the actual statistic.
And then 3 or 5
insane.
of them are going to, like, you know, their liver enzymes are going to be elevated or something. You know what
My
I mean? Like,
brother just poisoned himself with too much ibuprofen because he has a sinus infection. Like, I mean, it's actually pretty easy to do. Like, it's crazy.
what? So, okay. My brother just broke his neck, younger brother, and he was paralyzed from like his chest down.
Okay.
And spent, you know, I don't know, several months in like the rehab. So now he's able to walk, but he was like, he's in New York. I'm from New York. I'm living in Florida, but he's in New York, and went back to where most of my family is in New York, and hanging out with this girl, and goes to this area where there's a stream outside, and, you know, just being a dude, like, he gets his feet wet but can't feel anything in there. And you mentioned neuropathy, and you also mentioned nerve healing capacity of these. Is that something that could like help with the, you know, not having like, you know, the sensation of touch in certain areas in your body, could like help bring that stuff back?
Yeah, we deal with that all the time. Like with paralysis, it sounds like he's not now, but like in that book I just told you about, we haven't dealt with anyone with like severed spinal cords. But there's a pilot that crashed in Panama, and they treated him via intrathecal, like what we do, into the spinal cord. And it took about a year and multiple treatments, but that guy is no longer paralyzed. It actually regenerated everything. So it can do that. And in your brother's case, the fact that he is walking again, very high chance. Like one of our patients, he lives here part-time now. He's from Arizona. He races Baja 1000, and you know those things, they bottom out, and he's like 56. You know, he's like, his back is toast. Like his neck, it was, the herniations were unreal. He couldn't feel his hands. And after we did this like stem cell treatment for him, like he immediately had sensation back in his hands. So it can definitely, the nerve stuff is actually blown my mind the most because it's so quick. Like that's nerves. They send out what are called neurotrophic factors that essentially guide the neurons to regenerate nerves. Like there's nothing else that fixes nerve pain. We get people that come in with back pain, like handfuls of gabapentin. I have yet to meet a person that gabapentin even helps them, but like they still prescribe it to everyone. And yeah, we're doing these quick injections, and people are nerve pain free a lot of the time. It's pretty crazy.
Here's an interesting story I'll tell you about my uncle. So my uncle has degenerative back disorder, and you know, so he at one point his spine is essentially like bone on bone. You know, the cartilage is essentially gone. And I know you mentioned cartilage was not like, you know, it's the slowest growing one.
Yeah.
But he actually had a surgery where they fused 2 vertebrae together. And he really needs 4, but in the United States, the procedure where they go in through your stomach and fuse all 4 at one time is not approved here. So he would have had to gone to Europe, or I guess maybe Mexico at this point. And I think it was $250,000 for that surgery in Europe because he wouldn't have insurance. Now he ended up taking, he was prescribed 180 milligrams of OxyContin a day for pain. So when we would go to his house for Thanksgiving toward about 6, 7 at night, he'd have an ice cream bowl on his lap, and he would just, you know, he'd nod off because he's just a zombie at that point. But I mean, I'm just wondering, like, how many stories of like that could, by going into your place and getting a simple injection of stem cells and maybe some PRP, could like literally like change their life. But yet it's not allowed in the United States because it's not patentable, which is disgusting.
So they can't make money off it. I mean, it's so messed up.
I guess Pfizer can't just open up like 50,000 clinics around the world to do this. That wouldn't, I mean, maybe it doesn't make sense for them, but
I mean, no, the US medical system, I kind of compare it to like old school Catholic Church. It's like, hey, listen to what the high priest says, dish out what he tells you to, you know, like, you know, don't read the Bible, don't read the literature, just push these pills we're telling you to. And it's not science anymore. it's become a cult, if anything, and it's messed up. It's
Well, the
not
past
about
2 years, we've had one person dictating science to us, and if I'm
they
not even
want
gonna
to
get into
turn you
that.
into a subscription model. It's like a SaaS system for people. I mean,
We talk
it's
about this on the
messed
channel all the
up.
time. They're not trying to cure
Right?
anything.
So do you I had a question about the hormones with MST, but do you more so on this topic, like you just mentioned that you have probably in the next several months going to have the largest stem cell clinic globally. I mean, I don't necessarily have the audience or the network to, at least the stories that I tell myself, right, to influence this in a really impactful way. But somebody with the network that you have and the experience of all these hundreds of stories has the capacity to potentially start molding things in a different way, right? Because you could, whether it is turning it into more media production or whatever the case is, to what I mean? Because this stuff is not just like it's taboo here in the US, but it can literally help so many people. You mentioned type 2 diabetes. Like, imagine instead of being like, hey, you got to be on fucking these drugs for the rest of your life, right? You got to come, like the SaaS model you were just talking about, right?
Yeah.
And now you can go do 1 treatment or 2 treatments and you're like better. And
that's why it's legal in Mexico, is because type 2 diabetes is so rampant here. Mexico is actually the fattest country in the world now. Beat the US even, if believe it or not. And we have we have socialized medicine. So they literally 2 years ago stopped giving metformin for free because the cheapest drug in the world bankrupted the socialized healthcare system. I mean, that's how fat Mexico is. And they, like our lab and stuff, they got pretty good relationships with different senators and stuff. And they're like, hey, this works. It's expensive for people here. So a lot of them will do like, 10 million a month, and maybe like a year or two down the road, it'll finally clear it up, where we prefer to just hit it with like 300 million and knock it right out. But yeah, they're like, hey, anything that'll help lower these, people needing metformin, they're like all for it. And that's why it's legal here.
Wow.
Okay. I wanted to ask one last question, and then we're going to probably wrap things up. Unless you had a question afterwards. So these meso cells, right? You would think that the way people live their lives, and like with their diet, just the lack of sleep and or hydration, or like all the stresses, they don't know how to fucking deal with stress, right? All of these things fuck up their endocrine system. Their hormones are just all whack, right? But if you have this, manager who is able to facilitate the appropriate things to help fix practically anything in the body, I would think that if you took a hormone panel beforehand or checked a bunch of shit and then blood work afterwards, that you might be able to actually see a difference. Have you tested that? Because that would be fascinating.
I have, and it doesn't do what you're hoping it will. I'll get back to that. All right, I'll just tell you the story. So there's studies on rats where they've injected into the testicles and seen it increased in testosterone production. So we do a treatment called the P shot. You want to feel 15 again? Best treatment in the world. But I had a patient who.
You're not going to have to tell us about the shot, by the way. You're not going to get away like that.
We'll get to that. But yeah, so there's these studies on it. So we've got this like 23% lidocaine cream, and I put some on my balls, and I took an insulin syringe, and I did 25 million. My hand was like shaking. And my levels, I cycled off testosterone. I've been on test for about 9 years. And I cycled off. My resting rate was around like 500 after I cycled off. And I got it up to about 680. And that's not, I like to be around like 1,000, 1,200 is kind of my favorite range where I feel the best. So I stayed off for about a month, but it wasn't high enough for me. So this patient though, he's like 60. He came in from Spain and he did it, but the results really only lasted like 6 months. So it doesn't seem to last. It seems like the Leydig cells they get kind of lazy, I guess. And even this doesn't seem to stimulate them. So for now, if you really want to do it, you just got to keep going exogenous. But we'll see in the future. It won't be this kind of stem cell that'll fix that.
What about things like with the thyroid?
Only with Hashimoto's disease. Like we have a treatment where the IV helps a ton, but we actually go in through the throat directly to the thyroid with 25 million. And yeah, with Hashimoto's, it's fixing it, but with just, yeah, actually I haven't had anybody do the throat with just regular, hypothyroidism, but it's pretty tough to convince someone to take that shot. So I've seen growth hormone help the thyroid though, because it does help with the, what's it called? It's like the iodization there in the thyroid. Like my wife, she got off of her thyroid meds for hypothyroidism after about 9 months at 1.8 IU a day. So, but it tends to come back once you stop taking it, and growth hormone's expensive. So it's not like necessarily the best option for it unless you can afford it, really.
I have two questions. Why the hell is human growth hormone so expensive? And B, where do you think stem cells and this treatment is going to be in? Of course.
We can hear you.
I know.
I heard it.
Where do you think this treatment is going to be in 20, 30, 40 years?
Yeah. So growth hormone's so expensive because the main way they make it is they grow it on the back of an E. coli strand, and then they have to filter it. And you can't have any E. coli in that, right? So you need millions of dollars of equipment. So all these guys buying blue tops and different things from China, like they're just mimicking side effects. Like numb hands is not a side effect of real growth hormone, even when you're doing 10 or 20 IU a day. Like it's just not. You might get some carpal tunnel, but like I had a guy here that was a bodybuilder doing 10 IU a day with insulin, and he was using these. This is like Pfizer Genotropin, Novo Nordisk Norditropin, like real growth hormone. And I'd ask him all the time. He did it for years, and I'm like, do you get like the numb tinglies? He's like, no. And I've had other guys too. No, and I've got some we get actually one of the top doctors for the Army in DC. I mean, this is the top dog, comes to us for growth hormone. He told me straight up, there are more studies on human growth hormone in the military than you would ever believe, and they will never release that to the public. They don't want you don't want the enemy knowing what your top soldiers are on and all these things. So like he has some TBI issues, and he's been coming to me for years. He's brought high-end politicians that could change the law have come to us, and even they don't want to change the law. They find their own workarounds. I mean, how messed up is that?
Rules for thee, not for me.
I just saw a study. I'm going to see if I think I might have saved it. But earlier today, where I didn't read through it, but I saved the actual title of it.
Sam, real quick while you're looking for that one, but where do you see this being in 20, 30, 40 years? Is this something to where I'd be like, I could stop in and say, hey, my knee and my shoulder are banged up. I've got this issue, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, all right, let's blend a couple of these, 10 million over here, boom, 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 drop it in an IV. They all kind of go through the body, do their own thing, fix me up. I mean, do you think that will ever get to that? I mean, do you think we're just at the very beginning stages?
I think it'll get that way, but not in the United States, unless something drastic change. Come on, the whole system of government and everything needs to change. It just needs to be torched to the ground and built back up. I don't see that happening.
I'm not talking about the U.S. The U.S. is a lost cause, medicine-wise. Yeah. I'm just saying, as stem cells on this planet, the few places actually doing this. I mean, how far do you think it could go?
Yeah, so we're the nice thing is more research is coming out, and one good field of it has actually been all the opening of the cannabis industry. Cannabinoids, the research there is incredible. There's some great studies into using cannabinoids with mesenchymal stem cells. They interact really well. Melatonin works really well combined with stem cells. I mean, so when we've got our new lab that'll be opening, I'm going to have a lot more control. Right now I have partners. Once that opens, it'll probably open at the end of the year. like I'm already talking with the biologist about like one of the requirements for owning a lab here is you have to do medical research. So she's actually got a PhD in immunology and all these things. So like we're going to start looking into some different things that will really, I think, move things forward. And like, you know, Sam said, if you go, I mean, right now there's over 100,000 published studies on Google Scholar into mesenchymal stem cells, over 30,000 on PubMed. And if you go to the sites about like ongoing studies, it's unreal. And the safety profile, you will not find a study that has like a bad outcome. It really is mind blowing. So it's coming. It's just they want to find ways to monetize it. That's the problem. It's already this perfect thing that I think we could add natural things to make better, but it's mind blowing. So they want to do all this gene therapy stuff. That stuff scares me, honestly, because at what point are you no longer human when you start messing with genetics? And that, I mean, I've got my own beliefs and things like that. So I don't want to go that route. Some people do, but I think we can get our body to work the right way with natural things. It's just going to take some cool science.
My guess is that once this becomes a lot more mainstream in the next 10 years and it's all over other countries, the pharmaceutical companies will figure out a way to tweak, you know, the stem cells in one little tiny way,
they already have,
and then that will get approved in the United States.
That's the induced pluripotent stem cells. It's coming, but look, they have to get it approved for each use. So, you know, they've kind of created their own holdback too, because to prevent people from getting in and, you know, messing with big pharma, they've actually made it really tough and expensive. Because look, they're just now doing heart things with them. Well, now you got to do kidneys. I mean, it's going to start with these big, you know, high number things, but it sucks because, I mean, if you look at the number of, they call them like orphan diseases, meaning they get no research, it's like something like, I think it's like 10 million people in the US have like an orphan disease where there's like no research on it. So it's like, what do you do? Like you're going to be, they're already forced to look for places like me and other places. And it's just going to get worse because it's not going to happen quick. They've got too much control.
And it's going to be crazy expensive. Like we're not talking about, you know, a couple $1,000s to fix a knee or hip. I mean, you're talking $100,000 only for the people that A, can afford it, or B, like this is the only way they can live.
Yeah.
This is the PubMed site for stem cells, right? So you search, this is how I find a lot of papers to look through or read, and then, or pull the, if I can search for the title, if they don't have the whole paper here, I will search this.
I thought that was Pfizer's profit from 2019 to 2021.
They're going private.
My bad.
Buying the stock back.
yeah, they're going to buy back the whole company, right? You have 31,000 papers with stem cells in relating to them or mentioned in this paper.
Yeah.
In 1 year that were released, 31,000, and we're just now. It looks like there may potentially be a drop off in 2022 because there's only 15,000 so far. But the second half of the year might see an acceleration of that in terms of the number of papers coming out around stem cells because they can. Like you mentioned, you can do like everything. It seems to help in some degrees.
And they might be slowing them down because the studies have been showing they help tremendously with the effects of COVID and with the side effects of like the jab. We've helped a lot of people with that. So I mean I don't know, man. It's all so messed up.
Okay, so I found this here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because in this community around the fitness stuff, HGH is kind of like awesome, right? We really enjoy that, but there's the argument like that taking it for a long time might not necessarily be a good thing. And I saw this here. This is from 2002. The prevention of growth deacceleration. This is related to people who are trying to grow taller or more quickly. Withdrawal of growth hormone therapy in idiopathic short stature. And basically just goes on to say that cycling from 7 days to I think every other day or something like that. And they followed these kids for 4 years. after they stopped the treatment, the kids that were every other day treated with growth hormone continued to the deacceleration of their growth trajectory slowed much slower than the people who were taking it every single day. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, but also on just like
Wait. So they were saying the scheduling was different. Say it again. I'm sorry.
Yep, the dosing schedule was different where it was either, I think it was every other day like the group was split up. One group had them every single day for treatment for HGH. The other group had it one day off, then one day on, one day off, and then one day on kind of thing.
Same dose?
I haven't read through. I took a screenshot just so I could read through it myself.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. But the group that was every other day, from the, basically just a tiny little bit, I haven't read through the whole study yet, said that the drop off of how quickly the growth continued to come down after you finished with HGH treatment, every other day actually stayed for longer. And I was like, "Ooh, that's fascinating." I put it into a file so that I can.
And we've seen that because we do get a lot of these like kids that like are going to be like, the next superstar athlete at some of these schools in the US that come to us, the smart parents. And man, I can think of one kid in particular. He was on it for a couple years. And I mean, when he came off, like his IGF-1 was still like, I think it was like under 100 when he came to us. I mean, like way too low, right? And then when he came back, he wasn't even on it. And it was like at 550 or something. Like it can stimulate like things too.
Wow.
It depends on what's causing it. It's really strange like that. Like some people, because my IGF-1 resting has been 150 for the past 9.5 years. It doesn't matter if I'm on a day, month, year, like there is no feedback loop. Like I'm at 150 and I'm usually over 300 when I'm on this stuff. So it's.
What do you think about taking HGH for, decades?
I don't think there's a problem with it because all the guys that I've seen, and it's not a lot of them, but one of my favorites is a guy who's like 76, looks like he's 50. It's actually my grandma remarried, and her husband's son is one of those guys. They decide he's gay later in life. This is his partner. And he is a retired pediatrician who has no pituitary gland function. So he's been on like growth hormone at 2 IU a day since like 1980 something. Like I thought he was younger than Uncle Kevin. I mean, it was nuts. And I had a Jeep Wrangler at the time, 2-door. This guy's jumping in the back like a kid. Like 76-year-olds don't move like that. Like, so he's one good example. I have another guy I'm going to do a video with here pretty soon. He's coming down. Again, the dude's 75. He came to me back in January because he crashed his mountain bike doing extreme downhill mountain bike racing. And the doctors were like, how are you not dead? Like barely dislocated his shoulder and healed in no time. We did some stem cells, but like now he's doing jujitsu at 75 and tapping everyone out. And again, he's been on growth for like 30 years. Then I have that, that doctor who's the top military guy. So it's like the reason they tell you it's not good is there's like one mouse study that showed higher IGF-1 led to like shorter lifespan. And it's like, that doesn't mean it translates to humans. And second, there are certain types of tumors that feed off of IGF-1, right? So what they've taught med school students is that you'll eventually get cancer, you'll have elevated IGF-1, and you'll die. But it's only in your system like 8 to 12 hours. Like I finally convinced my mom to get on it a few years ago. Like all she does is play tennis. I'm like, Mom, you should be on this. She does it. Well, she doesn't tell me she had an appointment with a skin doctor. And yeah, she had some melatonin here or skin cancer here and here. She didn't tell me about it. She finds out, yes, it is cancerous. She'd been on growth for 2 weeks. She's like, what do? I go, stop taking it. And she's fine. Like you have to like actively know you have cancer and keep taking it. And even then the studies aren't conclusive because who's going to go like Dr. Mengele and start like, pinning people with cancer? I mean, it's just, the studies aren't there. And don't get me wrong. I think it's probably, if you have cancer, that's one of our requirements. If you've had it within the past 5 years, or we do blood work and we find something, like we're not going to prescribe it to you. So, you just have to take those precautions. But I think it's very cancer preventative. it makes your cells replicate faster and more efficient. And that's going to prevent you from getting cancer. So I have yet in 9.5 years to have an HGH patient develop cancer. So, and I mean, I did the numbers the other day, like it would, I think I only had the numbers for Norditropin, but I mean, we sell thousands and thousands of these per year. And yeah, it's no cancer. So it's just a bunch of like scare tactics because they don't want you healthy. They don't want you happy. They don't want you thinking for yourself. And that's why they don't like testosterone or growth hormone or peptides, because God forbid you think for yourself and like don't follow all their propaganda, you know?
Wow, this has been a awesome conversation, Josh. There's going to be people who watch this, and if they want to reach out to you, how is the best way for them to contact you or your businesses or the things that you're associated with?
Yeah, I mean, the website there is www.dreambody.clinic, or we've got a toll-free number at 833-445-9089. But we're there. We're on all the social medias, just under Dream Body Clinic, and just trying to help as many people as we can.
Your website's really nice too. It's a really solid website. I like it.
Thanks. And we keep all the prices on there because I hate medical sites that don't tell you what something costs, because it's like going to a hospital in the US. Like I went to the ER one time, like 13 years ago, and like ended up with a $5,000 bill, and like they gave me Advil and told me I was a baby.
Yeah. And they charge you $180 per pill. Like
it was literally a $5,000 bill for nothing. I was like, no.
My girl was super dehydrated. She had issues. She was super dehydrated. Went to the ER, couldn't keep anything down, and they gave her a saline IV, and they wanted to charge her $900. And then she just filled out this form, like saying she couldn't pay for it, and they just wrote it off. And I'm like, why wouldn't you just charge like 50 and take 50? Why are you going to try to charge 900 and then write off everything?
The ER is downstairs from where I'm at right now. I had to take my son there one time, $25, and the doctor spent like 2 hours with us. Like that's how much it costs. $50 to spend an hour with any specialist you want in Mexico. And we're not talking crappy doctors. The plastic surgeon in the office next door to me, he's Canelo's personal plastic surgeon. Like he does plastic surgery at a quarter of the cost of the US. And like he does Canelo. He flies him to every fight. I mean, it's like, it blows your mind. He worked in Chicago for years, and like, I mean, some of these doctors, like the doctor that does our back, we do a specialized back treatment. It's called the ozone back treatment for really bad herniated discs. The orthopedic surgeon we worked with the Miami Dolphins, worked with the Barcelona soccer team. And I mean, it's mind-blowing, but he'd rather live here in Mexico where, yeah, he gets paid less, but like the quality of life and the amount of money he makes just goes so much further. It's crazy. Yeah.
Could you see a world, and apologize, and then we'll wrap things up here. I just keep coming up with more questions. In the bodybuilding world, I could see, some form of combination between the MSC cells and or an anabolic to like bring like inhuman levels of like right. We already see these guys.
I know,
right?
Man, dude. these are the things that run through my head too. Like, I can't believe every pro athlete in the world isn't coming to me and we're just not pinning their muscles, because the first time I did a 300 million IV, like I put on 10 pounds of muscle that year. I was like 225. It was the worst year of my life working out. And I got up to 235, like, and no body fat increase. Like, it was crazy. And I've maintained that weight ever since. Like, and yeah, it's
looking up flights right now.
No, you have no idea how excited I am to like have my own lab. I'm gonna be like,
dude, you're welcome to come back on in the future if you want to, as you progress along this stuff, because I haven't found a great source of, I mean, I read through the papers, and I'm not like, medical is not my background, and when I first started looking through these papers, it would take me 4 fucking hours because like the vernacular is like, I have no idea what they're saying.
Wikipedia every other word. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, correct, exactly. Right click, select the word, and right click. Okay, what does this mean? And you don't even know what that means. So I followed that rabbit hole to try to get an understanding of it. But you're welcome back on. I appreciate your time and I acknowledge you for the work you're doing. Like, we need more people in the world who are bringing forth the truth and like impacting people in a positive way. So thank you for coming on.
No, thank you guys.
We'll put the website down below actually for your company, which has the phone number right on it as well. So thank you. TYL, did you have anything else you want to say?
I'll put your link in my YouTube video. Wait a second, I don't have a fucking YouTube video. God damn it. But anyway, pissing me off. I've been sitting here thinking about this whole time, but I'm definitely thinking about moving to Mexico. It just before even talking to you about this, but that's pretty much.
I can't recommend it enough, man. Like, it's the best decision I ever made. Like, you know what property tax is here? It's like it's less than 1%. You spend like a couple $100 a year. I mean, you actually own your property.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I hear Mexico, Thailand, it's just so much better.
Yeah, like
how much
car insurance is nothing for full coverage. Like, I mean, that you don't think of all the other taxes you pay that aren't outright taxes, but like cops here drive around with their top lights on everywhere. They're not they're actually there to serve and protect. Like, it's like I've never gotten a ticket, like literally.
How does the migration, because that is definitely something on the 3 to 7. Like, I plan on getting multiple citizenships and then potentially
5 years to get citizenship here.
And you have to move there first.
Well, there's tricks. So if you so in Tijuana at the border, if you cross the border, there's a bridge you can walk across. They never stamp your passport or notice. Like, I got one guy who lives in China that he did that like 5 years ago. He just like flew to Tijuana, walked across, and flew back to China. And he got his passport 5 years later because he did the paperwork first. And like, they never knew that he left the country.
Oh, wow.
You could even live in the States and just, wait the 5 years and get it. Yeah, it's
really. But you can live there without citizenship, obviously. But
they do.
Own property.
You start with like a temporary residency, and then you can do for 3 years, and you do 2 years of permanent residency. You can do permanent residency forever, but it's like you might as well just get the citizenship at the 5 years. You can own property. It's a different credit system. So like, if you screwed up your credit, or hey, it's a bear market for crypto, if you want to just go max out those credit cards and start a new credit system.
Awesome. I like that.
What about taxes? Are taxes
the thing is, if you were just living here, if you weren't working here, it's really tough to get a job here. But if you just moved down and like you had an online business, you don't technically have to pay taxes here. Like, you could just live here. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. So you would never pay taxes. Like, there's like Puerto Vallarta, there's tens of thousands of like expats that live here. We're like a 5-hour drive from Guadalajara, the second biggest city in Mexico, the largest expat community in the world of Americans and I think Canadians is there. There's like 30 or 40,000. It feels like Palm Springs 20 years ago. Like, everyone's over 70. It's this really cool lake town, but like, yeah, it's you don't have to pay taxes here. And technically, if you don't own anything in the States, like, you don't have to pay taxes there. Just once you opt into the system, that's where they get you. I have patients that have beat the IRS in court. They haven't filed in forever. It's all voluntary at the end of the day.
I think to wrap up, what I've learned today is that I should be taking growth hormone. I should max out all my credit cards, throw it into crypto, and then move to Mexico. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know what you guys heard, but that's what I heard.
New credit system, so you can just get rid of those.
No, I have great credit. I'm just going to get a shit ton of cards. All right, well, I'm going to do that right now.
Be a beachfront in no time, man. Come on down.
I want to go back. I was down in Mexico over there on the water. I don't remember exactly where we stayed, but a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. And I'd like to go back out there. But I am going to wrap this up. If you guys enjoyed the show, I definitely did. So hopefully you did. If you are watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment, or if you're on my channel, if you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, leave us a review, screenshot that, and tag us on Instagram, or jump over to dreambody.clinic and check them out. If this is interesting or stimulating to you guys, take a vacation and get all your stuff taken care of at the same exact time. Peace.